Hi everybody, welcome to Saturday Live at the Backyard Bird Center. You know, these cold winter nights that we're really starting to experience now, we're getting a lot of questions about how do birds survive, or what can we do to help birds survive these cold nights. A few things to consider. Let's think about this. One, the most important thing to remember is birds are warm-blooded. So one of the reasons we see feeding activity really pick up towards sunset is birds are packing in the food so they can make it through a cold night. Their bodies can make their own body heat if they have a good food source, but they also need to be protected from weather. So another thing to consider is that you know that most of them roost or sleep in trees or bushes. They like thick vegetation so that they're protected from wind and protected from rain and things like that. And the most common question that comes up from that is, well, if a bird sleeps on a limb, how does he keep from falling off once he goes to sleep? That's a pretty cool adaptation birds have too. Birds are, especially songbirds are known as perching birds, and there's a reason for that. And I always tell the kids when we teach this in the nature centers and things is you take, 3 fingers forward and your thumb, and you take that and you pretend like this is their limb, and you put that around that limb, the 3 around this way and the 1 around the back. When a bird sits down on a limb, and that means they put their weight down on their legs. They literally have a locking mechanism in their legs that lock their their phalanges, their toes, around that limb, so that until they lift their weight off of their legs, they can't fall off. Their toes can't let go as long as their weight is down on their legs, which is pretty darn cool. That's how they sleep without having to worry and getting blown by the wind, and they don't have to worry about falling off the limb. Now in the morning, they have to lift their body weight up off their legs to get their toes to release so they can fly away. So that's how birds sleep on limbs without falling off. And they do like thick evergreen bushes. So one of the ways you can help birds in winter, of course, is do your landscaping. We really like red cedars. Red cedars are native. They're also very well, produce a lot of vegetation. They have berries as well for food, but that thick vegetation protects them from predators and also from wind and snow and things like that. So rule number 1 for helping birds in winter and survive winter nights is to provide good thick vegetation for them to sleep in during the nights. Now, some of our native cavity nesters, things like bluebirds, chickadees, titmice, the wrens, and of course all the woodpeckers, those guys, which naturally like cavities, holes in trees, are going to utilize those type of places to get out of the weather. So nest boxes that we use to attract them to nest in the spring can and are often used as places for them to sleep in during the winter months. Some boxes are actually built so that you can change them around. This is the, I don't know if you see it, but this box is what it looks like in the nesting position, but this is it converted in the winter for a roosting box. The birds can go in this hole, and a lot of people will just put a stick in there or two so they can get up in the middle part of the box and perch on the stick at night, and that protects them from wind and rain and things like that. There are boxes that are created like this one, if you can see it, as a roosting box, quite literally built for several. There's rods running through there for many birds to get on there. Some very famous stories about birds roosting like that. There are some pictures that you can probably find on the internet of like 9 or 10 bluebirds crammed in one bluebird box, all stacked on top of each other on a cold night. That's how they help conserve energy among themselves. There's a study. There was a story from England, I think actually Scotland, where they documented 63 wrens, which for us those are winter wrens, they're smaller than our house wrens. So there were 63 wrens in one nest box at night, or sleeping in one, and all stacked on top of each other. Pretty amazing story. One of my favorite stories is that I personally experienced was a Carolina wren. I had an old bird feeder back in North Carolina that was empty. And it was an old lantern-shaped bird feeder. It had 4 holes in it. And I was looking out the window one night. It wasn't winter, but it was, I think, spring. And I looked out there at sunset, and it was getting really dark, and the Carolina wren landed on that old bird feeder. and he turned around and he backed into the hole, one of the 4 holes in the bird feeder, and got down, and he was just had his bill sticking out of the hole, and so he slept inside the bird feeder. That's what he used to get in out of the element. So that was pretty fun. So you can do lots of different things. These, if you have nest boxes in your yard, you know, you can pretty confidently see they're probably using them. If you want something simpler than that, something that came out of Europe a few years ago, now several years ago, are the Roosting Pockets. And these are not built to be nest places. These are just places for birds to get out of the cold and the weather at night. You can have several of these placed around in your garden, or hanging on your fence, or tucked up underneath your deck, in a nook underneath there. And it's just a place for the birds to get in. Chickadees and titmice, and especially wrens, love these things to get out of the elements. So that's something you can do to help birds survive winter in this area. Lots of different choices there. So remember, feeding birds, providing a place to roost, whether in your native landscaping or in man-made structures like this, and you can help these birds get through these tougher nights, especially coming up here in January when it's really harsh. So until then, send in ideas for the programs. Like the videos if you do. Share them. That really helps us out. Until then, next week, let's come by and let's talk birds.
2, 1.
Would you like to learn more about wild birds? You might want to hit that subscribe button.